That's why. I did it again. I forgot to unmute. Like, I did it again. Well, no music this time. Sorry, people. Ugh. Which means we can move it. And I don't... Again, I'm lazy today. So, crappity crap. There. Or not. Maybe I'll just, like, do this. I'm really sorry. Yeah. Had a little, time off. Go. Had a little time off for Easter. That was fun. Just, basically plowed through a book in 2 days. So, that was fun. But yeah! We're going to be starting a new book today. It is called The Dark Secret. It is book 4 in the Wings of Fire series, right here. And the dragon we'll be following is the dragon on the cover. This is Starflight. He is a Nightwing with no telepathy, like no mind reading abilities, and he can't see into the future either. Like the two traits that, you know, the dragons associate with Nightwings. And they even called him, Marosio even called him a peculiar dragonette. Because he couldn't do either. He's sweet. He's more book smart than street smart, you know. He likes to, what's it called? But yeah, Starflight likes to read books and all that. He's not the brave kind of dragon. He's book smart, not street smart. Yeah. I hope you got your water with you, because I forgot to fill my water bottle up. But don't worry, I have actually been drinking a lot of water recently. It's almost empty, you can hear. I should probably turn these off. I didn't do that. There, turned off. But yeah. Back from my break. There. I'm very... What am I gonna do with my hands and all that? But yeah. I'm back from my break. For my Easter break. I had a relaxing time away from home with my spare parents. And what we did was just relax, and I plowed through a book, and that was really fun to do. Like, just be able to relax, lay back and relax and read a book without feeling guilty that I'm not doing anything else. Like, I feel guilty most of the time because I don't have school anymore because of my depression. So I'm just home 24/7, and I feel guilty for just staying in my room, being online. Yeah. Sorry, there's something in my throat all of a sudden. I don't know what that is. But yeah. No music today. I'm sorry. I need to figure out how to record desk audio in that regard with Streamlabs. Oh dear. But yeah. And if you've been here for a while, you'll know that I usually take 10 minutes before I start reading or like doing anything else in my streams. So let's not go. Yeah, I usually, you can't really see it right now. I have this shelf. I usually have it up with something on, but I couldn't be bothered today. It's my first stream after my break. Yeah. Oh, and if you've seen my schedule, I've updated it. So storytime streams are Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then it will be Undertale, Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. Until I'm done with that, and then we'll find something else to do. But yeah. Let's start the Dark Secret. I haven't done with this with 3 other books I've read so far, but should we read the back? Like, should I read it like on stream, like so you also can get a feel for what's going to happen? I haven't read it yet, so I probably should, shouldn't I? Yeah, probably should, because yeah, I'll do that. In the shadows, trouble is brewing. The mysterious Nightwings keep everything hidden, from their home and their queen to their legions in the war. Now they've kidnapped their own Dragonet of Destiny, and Starlight is finally meeting the rest of his tribe, whether he wants to or not. The Nightwings have also kidnapped several innocent Rainwings, now trapped in the dark, barren, miserable place that is the Nightwing Kingdom. Starlight wants to help the Rainwings, but he's busy saving his own scales and trying to find a way back to his friends. The fate of 2 kingdoms rests in his talons, and with no one to save him. Starlight will have to find a way to be brave before it's too late. Yeah, because Starlight is a book smart dragon, not a street smart dragon. I'm thinking he's like maybe got an anxiety disorder. Whenever there's trouble or he's scared or something, he freezes up. He can't move. He is not very good at fighting, all that, so, and, you know, as you heard, there's a war going on, so. And there's a lot of pages I need to scroll through because we got, like, who's the book's for, and then we got a map of Pyria. It's not very easy to see for you guys, but it's like telling where strongholds are, where palaces are, where the kingdoms are, where like their scavenger dens, and some notable landmarks. Obviously, there's not the Sea Palace or the Nightwing Kingdom, where that is, because nobody knows except for the Nightwings. And then we have the guide, a Nightwing Guide to the Dragons of Pyria, where we got like descriptions, abilities, queens, and alliances of the dragons, and some drawings of them as well. I don't know if you want to hear that, or just want to go straight to the to rereading the Dragonet Prophecy and then get started actually reading the book. Yeah, we'll be doing that. It'll take too long with reading about the dragons. It's not that much, but it's still a lot. Anywho, the Dragonet Prophecy. When the war has lasted 20 years, the Dragonets will come. When the land is soaked in blood and tears, the dragonets will come. Find the sea wing egg of deepest blue, wings of night shall come to you. The largest egg in mountain high will give to you the wings of sky. For wings of earth, search through the mud for an egg the color of dragon blood. And hidden alone from the rival queens, a sandwing egg awaits unseen. Of 3 queens who blister and blaze and burn, 2 shall die and 1 shall learn. If she bows to a fate that is stronger and higher, she'll have the power of wings of fire. 5 eggs to hatch on brightest night, 5 dragons born to end the fight. Darkness will rise to bring the light, the dragonets are coming. So that is the Dragonet prophecy, which at least the 5 first books revolve around, basically. And I just now realized that it doesn't actually say that the Dragonets are going to choose the next Sandwing Queen, but just that 2 of them will die. 2 of the Sandwings, 2 of the 3 Sandwing sisters will die, and 1 will learn. Not that 2 will die and 1 will become queen. I just now realized that. I don't know if that'll probably come into play later. I just now realized that it doesn't say anything about the Dragonets choosing which of the queens is going to become, which of the 3 sisters are actually going to become queen. It's just what everybody says. Like, it doesn't say that. Nowhere in the prophecy does it say that. So, and even among the Nightwings, I am pretty shocked that, because it came from a Nightwing, this prophecy. So I'm pretty shocked, I guess. Like, confused why nobody bit onto that. Like, what? You know, let's move on to the prologue. The ice dragons came out of nowhere. It should have been a quiet night. They shouldn't have seen anyone but skywings and other mudwings on their patrol along the mountainous border between their kingdoms. There hadn't been a battle near the village since the one where they lost the crane 16 days ago. Reed still couldn't think about that battle without feeling a huge pit open inside his chest. Sometimes he wanted to close his eyes and fall into a pit and never come out, but he couldn't. He had 4 other brothers and sisters who depended on him. He was their leader, their big wings. Even though he knew now that he wasn't supposed to be. It should have been their brother Clay, whose egg was stolen before they hatched. Oh my gosh! Ah, this is Clay's siblings! Ah! Of course. Did you hear that? Umber whispered, darting up to fly beside him, the smallest dragon in their mudwing troop of siblings. Umber was also the most observant. Reed knew by now that it was always worth listening to him. Oh, him. What? Reed whispered back, tilting his head and straining his eyes. His wings caught the air currents as they both soared higher, and he studied the dark, jagged shapes of the claws of the clouds mountains. He couldn't see any movement or hear any wing beats. Still, he twisted around to check on his brothers and sisters, calling them closer with a flick of his tail. In a moment, Pheasant, Sora, and Marsh were flying in a close formation behind him. I thought I heard hissing, Umber said. Somewhere close by. Reed glanced down uneasily at the shadowy trees that covered the mountain slope below them. Anything could be hiding in there. But the only sound he heard was the Sandwing General up ahead, calling at top volume as if Stealth Patrol were only a funny name for what they were doing. Move it, mudwings! Bellowed the Sand Dragon. His squadron of 7 Sandwings were all fiercely loyal to the Queen Byrne, hovered behind him, grunting. I want to wrap up this patrol and get some sleep tonight. It was probably nothing, Umber said to Reed. And that was when the 9 ice dragons suddenly shot out of the forest and attacked the Sandwings. It was so fast, so calculated and swift and sudden that 2 Sandwings were sent spiraling toward the group with shredded wings and blood pouring from their throats before Reed could even process that this was a real attack. Marsh shrieked with terror and grabbed Reed, nearly tumbling the big wings out of the sky. Marsh had never really recovered from their first battle, where he'd seen their sister Crane die in front of him. I need to do something about that, Reed thought, but not right now. Marsh, keep it together, he shouted, pulling his wing free. Come on, quick, we have to help. He saw the hesitation on all their faces and caught himself wondering, again, what Clay would have done in this situation, and whether the others would have been happier and safer following him. And also wondering whether they were wondering that too. So, if you don't know, I have presumably mice running around in my walls, and I think I just heard a mouse from over there. And not from within. It was like doing something on my couch, like scratching my couch or something. I don't know what it's doing. But we've recently discovered that we have rats. So I've started to wonder if it's actually a rat that's in my walls. Sounds a lot bigger and it doesn't get scared or anything when I tap the wall. Like a mouse would. So I'm probably gonna stop a lot of times because of the noises that'll come from my walls. Sorry. Let's continue. But no one said what they must be thinking. It's a suicide mission. What help can we be? I don't want to lose another sibling. Instead, they formed up behind him and dove toward the writhing dragons. Reed hated fighting Icewings. Their serrated claws seemed 10 times sharper than normal claws, and their whipped thin tails left stinging marks across his snout and wings. Worst of all, they could just breathe on you and kill you. He shot a burst of fire at the biggest Icewing, who was grappling with the Sandwing general. Her teeth snapped shut and she hissed at him, but she was too busy with the Sandwing to come after Reed. He spun in the air, lashing out at silvery white scales as another Icewing attacked his flank. They clutched each other with fierce talons for a moment, the wind buffeting their wings. Finally, Reed managed to cough out another ball of flames, and the Icewing jerked away, narrowly avoiding a singed nose. Reed spotted an Icewing diving toward Umber and leaped to knock his brother aside, catching the brunt of the white dragon's momentum against his chest. As he staggered back, he saw another Icewing wrap her dangerous claws around Sora's neck, and he roared with fury. Pheasant was there in an instant, throwing the Icewing off Sora, but the ice dragon came back at them with her mouth open to shoot her frost breath. I can't lose anyone else, Reed thought. It'll kill me. He smashed into the Icewing's side and sliced his claws across her throat while she was twisting to breathe on him. Sorry. Her eyes went wide and she made an agonized, gargling noise as blood bubbled from the wounds. When he let go of her, the Icewing soldier fell toward the dark forest, her wings twitching feebly like a dying grasshopper. Retreat! A voice suddenly howled. Reed's heart jumped hopefully, thinking the Ice Wings were giving up. But then he realized it was the Sandwing General. Retreat! The Sand Dragon yelled again. Reed thought they might defeat the Ice Wings if they kept fighting, but it wasn't worth the risk. Every moment was another opportunity for an Ice Wing to kill one of his brothers or sisters. Retreating meant keeping them alive. Retreat! He echoed the general, grabbing Umber and pulling him back. Fall back! Pheasant, you too! He scanned the struggling shapes in the moonlight and picked out his troop, all still alive for now. His sister sank her teeth into her opponent's forearm, and he released her with a shriek of pain. In a flash, she was at Reed's side, and they soared up into the sky with Marsh, Sora, and Umber right beside him. Reed saw the Sandwings take off toward the mountains. Most of the Ice Wings shot after them, only two turned to pursue him and his siblings. This way! He cried, diving for the forest. If Ice Wings could hide in there, so could his dragons. He wasn't obligated to follow these Sandwings. They'd probably make a run for the Sky Palace anyway, and he didn't want to lead the Ice Wings back to his village. Pine branches whipped against his face as he hit the trees. His brothers and sisters had practiced a formation like this, zipping through an overgrown forest while staying together. He had to trust that they'd remember and be close behind him. Hey.
Når nogen siger, livet er hårdt, fristes jeg til at sige, sammenlignet med hvad?
Okay. There. He heard the sound of thrashing wings further back and risked a glance over his shoulder. Even in the shadows, he recognized the shape of how his brothers and sisters flew. They were all there. It must be the Ice Wings who'd gotten caught in the upper branches. Reed took a chance and landed. The others dropped to the ground with him, and they all immediately flattened themselves with wings outstretched, becoming puddles of a shadow in the dark forest floor. Silence fell. No one breathed. The branches creaked overhead, and small night animals skittered through the bushes around them. Reed felt a squirrel dart over his foot, but he didn't move a muscle. After a long while, they heard a faraway whistle and the sound of wings in the distance, as if the Ice Wings were reassembled. As if the Ice Wings had reassembled to fly away. Reed still didn't move. He waited for almost an hour until he couldn't hold his breath any longer, until any and all dragon noises had faded long ago. Then, very carefully and quietly, he inhaled. He heard the others do the same. Is anyone hurt? Reed asked softly. That was awful, Marsh whispered. I thought we were going to die. I'm fine, Pheasant said. Nothing that won't heal soon. I'm all right, too, Sora said hoarsely. Umber? Reed said when the smallest dragonette didn't respond. I hate this war, Umber burst out. I don't understand what we're even fighting for. Who cares who the Sandwing Queen is? I've never met Burn, and I don't want to. Why am I fighting an Icewing over a throne that has nothing to do with either of us? Because our queen says we have to, Pheasant said, with a little more sarcasm than Reed thought was safe, even if there was no one to overhear. Queen Mohin must have a good reason for allying with Burn and the Skywings, Reed said. We shouldn't doubt her. Besides, the war will be over soon, Sora said unexpectedly. She hardly ever spoke, and she'd spoken even less since Crane's death. Reed turned and saw her eyes reflecting the glow of the moonlight. Clay's going to end it. There was something about the way she said Clay's name that made Reed want to sink into a mud puddle and stay there for a month. She sounded as if she believed in him so much, a dragon they'd barely met. They followed Reed and they loved him. He knew that, but surely they must wonder what could have been. And whether Crane might still be alive if Clay was their big wings all along. That's true, Umber said, lifting his head. Clay and his friends, they're going to save us soon. How soon? Marsh said. I thought the prophecy said 20 years. Doesn't that mean 2 more years before they end the war? Actually, Pheasant said, some dragons think it depends on when you start counting. If you count from the first battle, it's only been 18 years. But if you go back to the death of Queen Oasis, which is really when this whole thing started, it's been almost 20 years. She caught the tilt of Reed's head and shrugged. I've been reading about the prophecy since we realized Clay's in it. There was a pause as they all had their own thoughts about Clay, the war, and the prophecy. If you're all unhappy, Reed said sensitively, we could, we could try to find the talents of peace. Pheasant let out a shocked hiss. I may not like this war, but that doesn't mean we should leave our tribe and our home. We're Mudwings. We belong in our village. Unless you think we should leave, Marsh said, leaning against Reed's side. I'll do whatever you decide. We all will, Umber said. Reed knew they would, but should they? He had no idea what to do, betray his tribe or keep risking his sibling's life. You don't have to decide tonight, Pheasant said more gently. We just had a narrow escape. Let's go home and sleep. We'll all feel better in the morning. Reed nodded, and they gathered themselves, stretching their cramped wings as best they could under the trees. Shadows of pine needles slid across their scales, smelling of winter fires. What were those icewings doing here anyway? Marsh asked, stamping his feet. I have no idea, Reed said. It seemed as though they were lying in wait for us, but it's not like we're an important patrol. Perhaps they were here for something else, and we weren't lucky enough to attract their attention. Maybe they were here for the scavenger den, Umber said. What scavenger den? Reed glanced at him, surprised. Can't you smell it? Umber asked. We flew over part of it too. It's hidden it's pretty well hidden in the forest. How do you notice something like that in the middle of a frantic escape? Pheasant demanded. Umber shrugged. Why would the Icewings care about a scavenger den? Sora asked softly. They all thought for a moment, then looked at Reed. I don't know, he said helplessly. It felt like he was saying that all the time these days. Well, Pheasant said, spreading her wings, it doesn't matter. What matters is we survived another battle, thanks to Reed. I wonder if they really feel that way, he thought. I certainly don't. I hope we survive the next one, Marsh said gloomily. I hope we don't have to, Umber said. I hope Clay fulfills the prophecy and ends the war and saves the world really soon, before we have to do any more fighting. Don't you think? Maybe he will? Maybe, Pheasant said. I hope so. I do too, Reed said. He looked up at the stars. Before the war takes anyone else I care about. Before our village is destroyed. Before I have to choose between loyalty to my tribe and the safety of my brothers and sisters. Before we have to kill anyone else. I hope so too. End of the prologue. Alright. And for anyone who's new, the books are usually all the books are in three parts. They aren't equally long or anything. In the first book, the part 3 was like 3 chapters long, maybe? I think. I don't remember. So, it varies from book to book. But part 1 of this book is called The Secret Plan. And the chapters doesn't have names, it's just chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. But yeah. And the prologue and epilogue are not from the point of view of the book and on the cover, who we follow through the book. It's to get an insight on what's happening in the world of Pyria. That will later on become relevant to the series. Because we follow one dragon's point of view, so we don't get a lot of information about what actually happens out in the world. So that's what the epilogue and prologue is for. Anyhow, chapter 1. Where is she? Starlight suspected that he might be dead, except that everything hurt so much. Darkness pressed against his eyes whenever he tried to open them. His nose and throat ached in a fierce raw way, as if they'd been scraped out with a crocodile tail. Is she alright? He couldn't remember what he'd dreamed and what was real. Perhaps he was still under the mountain. Perhaps his friends had never tried to escape their guardians. Maybe this was one long nightmare that had started with the threat of Marosia's visit. Marosia is the dragon who came with the prophecy, and is a huge jackass. I hate Marosia. I love to hate him. But Starlight was sure he could remember the large Nightwing taking him aside. There was a lecture about how Nightwings have a reputation to uphold, and Nightwings are natural leaders, and you must make the others respect you, fear you, and follow you, or you'll be the greatest disappointment our tribe has ever produced. Starlight couldn't have conjured that from his own brain. That was all real. He curled onto his side and felt jagged rocks pressed into his scales. Was the Skywing Palace real? The dragonets captured before even tasting sunlight? The prison in the Tower of the Rock? The baking hot arena sands that smelled of blood and terror? Queen Scarlet's delight at capturing him, a real Nightwing out in the world, and her plans to make him fight, and her excitement about the prospect of watching him die. No, that had been real, because Starlight remembered being rescued by the Nightwings. He remembered watching his friends turn into small dots below him, blue and brown and bright. And he knew it was real because it felt so much like this felt, as if he were a scroll ripped in half down the middle, so none of the words made any sense anymore. Will he ever see her again? I hope she's not here. I hope she's safe somewhere. I think there's something wrong with him. Was that a voice? He tried to listen, but his dreams dragged him back down. There had been another stern lecture from Marosia. It was essential for Starlight to be the leader of the Dragonets. Everything depended on him. And a new order. He must convince the others to choose Blister as the next Sandwing Queen. Maybe they killed him by accident. That'll be alright. Maybe... Ooh, what's going on here? I don't know who they are, so I don't know what voices to give them. I keep looking at my screen. I shouldn't. The camera's right there. That'll be alright. Maybe I'll get to be in the prophecy instead. I don't think that's how it works, Fierce Teeth. And then there was the Kingdom of the Sea. No one would listen to him. He couldn't lead anyone. His friends practically laughed at him when he tried to support Blister. Another prison, another escape where Starlight did just about nothing to help. And then the rainforest and the strange unnatural tunnels. One to the Kingdom of Sand and one, apparently, to the secret home of the Nightwings. That Starlight remembered. He remembered staring up at it, the dark hole in the tree that led to a home he'd never seen. I bet he'd wake up if I beat him. I bet Marosia would throw you in the volcano if he found tooth marks on his prophecy pet. I bet my mom would have him for lunch if he tried. And he was definitely hearing voices, unfamiliar voices, very close by. The memory of the rainforest was blurring. Starflight tried to fix his mind on it. Those last moments guarding the tunnel so the Nightwings wouldn't come through and attack the Rainwings. What had happened? Well, he'd better wake up and be interesting soon, or else Shiro will take him away again before we can get to ask him anything. Ooh, I have an idea. Claws scrabbled on rock, and then there was quiet. Starflight's eyelids felt too heavy to open, as if extra scales were piled on top of him. He let the darkness drift up over him again. Right, guarding the hole. With clay. Morning sunbeams flickering through the green leaves, octopus blue flowers turning their heads up to the light. Sunny was back in the village, with Tsunami watching Glory try to become the queen of the Rainwings, of all things. Sunny had brought them food the night before, her golden scales brushing against his dark wings as she passed him strange little purple fruits. I love you, he would never say. Don't hate me because of what the other Nightwings have done. Don't think I'm like my tribe. Don't listen to Gloria's description of my kingdom. The smoke and the fire and the smell and the death and the trapped, tortured Rainwings and the cruel black dragons. Don't look at me like I'm one of them. Like I could never, like I could ever do what they've done. Please. And then she glanced up at him and smiled, and in Sunny's eyes he could see himself as Starlight, just fine the way he was. A friend, which made everything better and worse at the same time. Careful! I'm not going to. Careful! I'm not going back for more if you spill it, idiot. Get your great honking wings out from my back, then, fathead. The voices again. Starlight caught at the memories, trying to remember the last thing that had happened before everything went dark. He'd been staring at the hole, wondering what the other Nightwings were really like, wondering if they were all as scary as Marozia, wondering if he went through and talked to them, whether they would listen. What if he could stop the Nightwings and Rainwings from fighting? What if his tribe understood him and believed in him? What if they would? What if they thought he was better to be smart? It was better to be smart than brave. What if they didn't care that he had no special Nightwing powers? What would Sunny think of me then? She'd probably think, who are you and what have you done with Starflight? Because there's no way he'd ever be brave enough to go through that tunnel on his own. And then Clay had yelped, Did you see that? I think it was a boar. I'll be right back. And poor ever-hungry Clay had charged off into the trees, leaving Starflight to watch the hole alone. In a heartbeat, dark wings had boiled out of the hole. Dark claws had circled his snout. A dark voice had hissed in his ear. Silence if you want your friend to live. Another dark voice. Better safe than sorry. Although he hadn't made a sound, and he'd known it would hurt right before the blow struck his head, and pain blazed through him, and that was the last thing he. Splash! Starflight jolted up with a yell. His eyes popped open. Freezing salt water cascaded over his snout and snaked down his neck, seeping into his scales. The muddled heavy feeling vanished in an instant. It worked! Cheered one of the unfamiliar voices. Drat! Said another. Drat! Said another. I really thought he was dead. Starflight shook his head and the pain ricocheted around inside. He rubbed at his snout, trying to clear the ocean water from his stinging eyes. 6 or 7, or maybe 8 dark blue shapes surrounded him. Beyond them, glowing red light pulsed in lines along the walls. The freezing water. The freezing water had cleared his nose for a moment, but heavy smoky air was already pressing back in. Who are you? Starflight gasped, or tried to. Huh. I thought he might attack us, said a third voice. That's what I would do. It doesn't look very dangerous, said another voice, skeptically. They should have picked someone bigger, don't you think? Bigger and scarier and fiercer. Like me, said the voice who had hoped Starflight was dead. You all have tiny You all have tiny rainwing brains, said yet another voice. Starflight was losing count. He was still inside his egg when they took him. They didn't know if he'd be big or scary, or even if he'd be male or female. Otherwise, of course, they would have picked a girl. Obviously. Like me. Hello? Starflight coughed. Hello? One of the shapes came close enough for him to make out the features of a disgruntled looking dragonette a year or two older than himself. He poked at his mouth and peered at his teeth, jabbed at his chest, and so he coughed again, inspected his claws, and sighed huffily. Weak, she declared. I'd have sent him back, too. You're just saying that because you're hoping they'll pick you instead, said another dragonette, pushing forward. He patted Starflight's head in an almost friendly way, but prophecies don't work like that. We'll see, she muttered. That's Fierce Teeth, said the friendlier dragonette to Starflight. Don't mind her. Older sisters always think they can do whatever you're doing better than you can. I know, I've got one too. I'm mighty close, by the way. Older sister? Starflight echoed, blinking at Fierce Teeth. Yes, this is a touching family reunion part. Yes, this is a touching family reunion part, she said. Same mother, different fathers, we assume. How do you feel? She eyed him from horns to tail. Ill, very ill, dying, perhaps. What part of Brightest Night are you having trouble with? Said another dragonette behind Fierce Teeth. Haven't you been listening in class? Events have to match the prophecy. Hi, Strange Dragon. I'm Mind Reader, but don't worry. I promise I'll stay out of your head. The older dragonettes in the room laughed uproariously, as if that was the most hilarious joke Imperius had. The three dragonettes, who looked younger than Starflight, rolled their eyes, like they were used to hearing jokes that made no sense from that group. Starflight rubbed his wet scales, confused. Now that his sight was clearing, he could see that he was in a long, narrow cave lined with indentations in the rock at regular intervals, all the right size for dragonette beds. He was curled on one of these, not far from a large archway that seemed to be the only exit from the room. Next to him, on the other floor, was a large hollow stone, which was apparently what the dragons had used to collect the seawater they'd just poured all over him. It didn't look like prison. It looked like a dormitory. Hot coals smoldered in alcoves in the walls, lending a red glow to the room. A skylight at each end of the cave allowed a bit of dim grey light to filter in. There were at least 50 sleeping spots that Starflight could see, but only about 11 of them looked slept in. Several had rough blankets heaped on them in messy piles, while others were scattered with objects that looked like seashells and twisted bits of rock. A few of the blanket-covered beds had a scroll lying next to them, which made Starflight's claws itch with longing. But most of the beds were completely bare, places for dragonettes, but no dragonettes to fill them. Starflight remembered something Morosia had said offhandedly, shortly after rescuing Starflight from the Sea Wings. He'd said, "We can't afford to lose any Nightwings, even peculiar little ones." Maybe there is something wrong with my tribe, Starflight thought. Maybe they're losing dragonettes somehow, or not having enough of them in the first place. Everything smelled like sulfur and decaying animals. As Fierce Teeth leaned over and jabbed his stomach again, Starflight realized that a lot of the decaying smell came from the dragonettes. They all had horrendously bad breath. Morosia's breath had never been wonderful either, but this was much worse. It took all of Starflight's willpower not to recoil when they spoke to him. They were also shockingly thin, every one of them, with narrow chests, bloodshot eyes, and hacking coughs. Even the dragonettes who survive are in pretty bad shape, Starflight thought. He stretched gingerly, eyeing the door. It didn't seem to be barricaded in any way. As far as Starflight could tell, he could walk right out into the caves beyond. It's probably a guard, he thought. Or lots of guards. Or maybe something really creepy, like Crincoral's electric eel, or a lava river, like the one that kept the rainwings trapped in their prison caves. A shiver of fear ran down his spine. "Why am I here?" he blurted. The little crowd of dragonettes exchanged glances. Because you failed," Fierce Teeth offered. "I assume." "We don't know that yet. We don't know that," Mighty Claws interjected. "A couple of the big dragons dropped you here a few hours ago, and you've been muttering and thrashing around ever since." "Yeah, lots of worry about Sunny. Who's Sunny?" one of the other dragonettes demanded. Starflight considered throwing himself into the volcano. "Another dragonette," he mumbled. "I hope he's safe. I hope she's safe." "I want to hear about the mainland," Mindreader said eagerly. "Tell us everything. We've heard there are trees taller than dragons, and that in some places the sky is blue. True? False? What's the coolest thing you've seen? What's the best thing you've eaten?" "You've never been to the mainland?" Starflight said. "Dragonauts aren't allowed to leave the island unless we're 10 years old," Mighty Claw said. "Apparently we can't be trusted to keep all the Nightwing secrets until then." Almost in unison, all the dragonets snorted impatiently. "You're the only exception," Fierce Teeth said in a voice dripping with scorn. "Him and the other one," Mindreader said. "I heard my mom say there was another." "I don't know any Nightwing secrets," Starflight said. Oh, said Mighty Claws. "I guess that's one way to make sure you keep them." The scrabble of claws in the hall outside heralded the appearance of a dragonette smaller than the others, perhaps 3 years old. She raced into the room and gasped, "He's coming!" Immediately, the dragonettes scattered to their sleeping spots. Half of them dove into their blankets and pretended to be asleep. A few of them grabbed their scrolls and looked studious. Others fussed busily with the objects around their beds. Fierce Teeth sat down on her bed, folded her wings, and glared at the doorway. Starflight wished he was unconscious again as he heard heavy footsteps tramping toward the door. He glanced up at the skylight, wondering if he could fit through it, but knowing perfectly well he was too terrified to try. With a scraping, hissing sound, Morosia slithered into the room. He frowned at Fierce Teeth, then looked coldly down his long nose at Starflight. "Up," he snarled. "The Queen of the Nightwings wants to see you." End of chapter 1. Oh dear. Oh my god, that was a lot of voices. That was a lot of different voices. I really hope they're not going to be significant throughout the book, because I have not given them great voices. I just gave them regular voices. Like, I don't know who they are. I don't know their character. I don't know their personality and all that, so I don't have anything to match it to. I kind of like Starflight's voice, actually. Also kind of basic. Sanam is basic too, but I don't know how much we'll see of her. I don't know how much we'll see of her in the book. I haven't read it, remember. Chapter 2. Starflight's expression with dragon expression. Starflight's experience with dragon queens thus far had not been exactly wonderful. Me? He stammered. Now? You mean right now? Shouldn't I mean, I'm not really prepared to, or I don't really look to see a queen. I mean, maybe. Stop blithering and follow me. Morosia swept out of the cave. Morosia swept out of the cave with a growl. Go, go, go! Mighty Claws hissed, flapping his wings as Starflight hesitated. Starflight's claws caught on small holes in the rocky floor, and he stumbled as he chased after the giant Nightwing. Volcanic rock, he thought, peering at the walls around him. I wonder when it last erupted. From the rumbling under his talons, and the heat rising through the floor, it didn't seem like the most dormant volcano. Morosia led the way up to a winding tunnel without looking back. Yawn! I don't want to yawn. I yawned while saying yawn. My friends, Starflight started to say. Sonny and the others, are they? The large black dragon didn't turn around. Starflight kept walking for a few minutes, then took a deep breath and tried again. When can I go back? His only answer was a snort of disgust. Starflight swallowed his questions and nervously tugged his wings in. The walls felt like they were getting closer. He didn't see any gods or rivers of lava. He didn't see any of the Nightwings at all. But as they moved along the tunnel, Starflight heard something up ahead, a hissing, murmuring sound that grew louder as they approached. Dragon voices, jumbled and arguing. Dread prickled through every scale of Starflight's body. If he hadn't been more terrified of what Morosia would do to him, he would have turned and bolted back down the tunnel. Finally, Morosia and Starflight stepped through an archway into a cave full of dragons. The walls were packed with dragon wings, with Nightwings hanging from cracks and rocks and the ceiling like bats. One by one, dark-scaled dragon heads turned toward them. The gathered Nightwings fell silent. A last voice cried, "We should attack now! We should have attacked yesterday!" Before cutting off abruptly as the speaker noticed Starflight. Starflight wondered again if he was dreaming, because this was his biggest nightmare come to life. A room full of angry Nightwings, all of them glaring at him. Watch it, Morosia growled as Starflight stumbled into him, and then Starflight saw what lay ahead of their talons. A few steps into the cave, the rocky path abruptly fell away on either side, leaving only a thin strip of stone to stand on. Below him was a bubbling lake of glowing orange lava. He could feel the heat crackling along his scales. Morosia stepped back to the safety of the doorway and prodded Starflight forward, so the dragonette was left alone on the spur of rock, surrounded by lava. Lava and Nightwings. And they're all reading my mind, he thought with another jolt of terror. They can all see my thoughts. They know I'm terrified and weak and useless, and that I don't think Blister should be the next Sandwing Queen, and that I think is a horrible place to live. This is a horrible place to live, and stop thinking about all the things I don't want them to see in my head. With a massive effort, Starflight focused on the details of the room around him. Think about what you see. Don't think about anything else. First, there weren't actually hundreds of dragons staring at him. He did a quick estimate, hiding his other thoughts inside mountains of numbers. Maybe about 40 black dragons filled their cave, most of them as large as Morosia, which meant they must be quite old. They were all as thin as the dragonettes in the dormitory, and many of them had worn patches on their scales, sores on their snouts and wings, and traces of blood around their nostrils. These dragons looked like the tribal opposite of the colorful, healthy, well-fed rainwings. There was a clear spot on the cave walls right across from him. It looked like a circle had been carved into the rock as wide across a starflight's wingspan, and then jabbed full of small holes, none of them bigger than a dragon's eye. The other dragons kept glancing at the circle as if waiting for it to do something. On the ledge beside the circle perched a dragon with a scar rippling down her chest. Her wings drooped in an odd way, as if they were weighed down with rocks, and she wore a cluster of diamonds around her neck. Another chain of smaller teardrop diamonds, was wound around the horns of on her head. But that can't be the queen, Starlight thought. She didn't have authority in her bones. She didn't radiate power all the way through her wingtips like the other queens he'd met. It took him only a moment of puzzling this out before he realized that there must be a dragon behind the screen, staring through all the holes at him. A chill sliced through his scales. Nobody could see her, but her presence filled the cave like heavy smoke. The Queen of the Nightwings. The scrolls always referred to her as mysterious and unknown, but Starlight hadn't imagined that she would keep herself hidden, even from her own tribe. Why? Because it's extra terrifying, he answered himself. This is him? Barked one of the dragons. Yes, Morosia growled. Thank you for following. Sorry. Yes, Morosia growled. We snatched him from the rainforest this morning. Wings rustled uneasily all around the cave. Has he told us anything? Asked another dragon. What do they know? What are they planning? How soon will they attack? Growled another. And how did that rainwing escape? Another one shouted as several dragons began to speak at once. We've heard reports that there was a mudwing with her. Mudwing! How did he get here? Why didn't we kill them before they got away? Talking about Glory and Clay, Starlight thought with a shudder. That's the rainwing I warned you about, Morosia snarled. The one the talents of peace got to replace the skywing they lost. He spat into the lava. This is exactly why I told them to kill her. A rainwing of all things. Oh, sorry. Aw, thank you. A rainwing of all things, said the dragon with the diamonds. What an unfortunate mistake. We had her, said a dragon with twisted horns. Here, in our talents, and nobody killed her. Who knows what she saw? Cried another dragon. If she warns the rainwings what we're planning, she can't possibly know that, Morosia said. She knows about the tunnels between our kingdoms, challenged a dragon from the far wall. And that little one escaped with her. She'll have told her everything she saw in the fortress. What if they figure it out? Yeah, kinda. A clamor of voices filled the cave. Figure what out? Starlight looked down at his talons and wished they weren't shaking so much. He was half afraid that he'd tremble himself off balance and into the lava. But that wasn't even in the top 20 things that was worrying about right now. He was worrying about right now. What are they planning? My day was fine. Didn't really do much. Easter. um, got not many things left. Not many left. He glanced up at the screen where the queen was hidden. She hadn't spoken at all yet, but he could feel her watching. From the way his skin prickled, he thought she hadn't taken her eyes off him since he entered the cave. All at once, the dragon with the diamond leaned toward the screen, tilting her head. A hush fell instantly around the room. Yeah. Nothing moved except the blub blub, blub blub, bloop bloop of bubbles in the lava. Every Nightwing present seemed to be holding his or her breath. Starlight didn't hear anything. No Queen's voice issuing regally from her hiding spot, but the Diamond Dragon nodded and straightened up again. Yeah. Um, it's always kind of been like that. Like, if you try to hold a conversation with me, I'll just end up nodding and and conversation isn't really my thing. But this is something I like because I like reading aloud because I can get immersed in the book um a lot, and it's it's really fun, especially when it's books I love. Thank you. um Starlight didn't hear anything, no Queen's voice issuing regally from her hiding spot, but the Diamond Dragon nodded and straightened up again. Queen Battlewinner says to shut up and ask him. It is book 4 of the series Wings of Fire. It's called The Dark Secret. There are 14 books in the series so far. 15th is in the writing. Currently. It's a really good book. I love dragons, as you can obviously tell, because this is a book about dragons. Yeah. To his horror, she pointed at Starlight. And that's why she's here. Make him tell us what they know and what they're doing, and what they're going to do next. Yeah, that's a lot of books. And there are supposed to be 5 in total in her series, and the 15th is currently being written. Like, book 14 was released in December, so. And there are 2 like Legends books that doesn't have anything to do with the series, but actually happens like 2,000 years before. Aw, thank you. And then there are like winglets, like 4 tiny books in one about like just small stories in the Wings of Fire universe. I haven't read those yet because it said there as a spoiler for book 5, and I haven't read book 5 yet. So. The listening dragons all swiveled their heads toward him. Falling into the lava suddenly sounded like a pretty great option. Starlight stammered several times. Yeah, it's a really good series. Starlight stammered several times. Speak or I kill you right now, Morosia growled behind him. Starlight pressed his front talons together and took a deep breath. Her name is Glory, he blurted. The dragons all hissed. This was not something they cared about. She said you have Rainwing prisoners. Please tell me she's not wrong. Please tell me she's wrong. Tell me it's all a mistake. But no one corrected him. Should he tell them Glory's plan? That she was trying to become queen of the Rainwings so she could build an army to come rescue their lost dragons? That they shouldn't underestimate her? Yeah. That's basically what happens. But I keep like looking up because I know there's an audience watching. But as soon as I start reading, it's just that. And like if they don't like my reading, if they don't like that I sometimes stumble over words and all that, they can just leave. If they don't like that, they can just leave. And if they start and like if they start saying mean things, they're gonna get banned. It's as easy as that. So yeah. um Would he be betraying his friends if he said all of that to the Nightwings? Or would he be betraying his tribe if he didn't? The close, smoky air of the cave pressed down around Starflight. What if I can fix everything? This is a chance you wanted. You asked Glory to let you talk to the Nightwings. You wanted to give them a chance to explain themselves. You wanted to find a peaceful solution so you wouldn't have to pick sides in a war. But now he was here, facing their dark eyes. He couldn't find. But now that he was here, facing their dark eyes, he couldn't find any of the brilliant words he'd meant to use. Suddenly, one of the nearest dragons snapped. Just tell us if they're planning an attack. Yes, Starflight blurted. I mean, I think so. This met with such an uproar that Starflight had to sit down and cover his head with his eyes. He'd said the worst thing possible. He'd made everything worse for Glory and the Rainwings, and he couldn't even bring himself to speak up and try that famous diplomacy he'd always thought was such a good idea. I wouldn't listen to me anyway, he told himself, but he didn't know if that was true. He wasn't brave enough to find out. It doesn't matter, rasped a hoarse, wet voice. Rainwings are no match for us. A horribly disfigured dragon pushed past Marozia, slithering into the cave and glowered at the other dragons. His snout was twisted and deformed by a terrible scar that had closed one nostril, melted several scales, and left nasty, oozing bubbles along his jawline. The dragon with diamonds frowned. Vengeance, you were not invited to this council. Yeah, I noticed, he hissed, and yet I know more than any dragons about Rainwings and what they can do. He gestured to his face, and I can tell you that this was a fluke. Rainwings are too stupid and cowardly to be dangerous. Most of you know I got this when I grabbed their queen. Well, turns out just one of their queens. Stupid tribe. And she had no idea what she was doing, or I'd be dead. She didn't even mean to spray me. They never do. Vengeance shook his head, breathing loudly through his mouth. They have Pyria's most powerful weapon, and they're too pathetic to use it. Maybe they were before this Glory came along, said one of the other dragons. From what Marozia says about her, she's not as weak as the rest of them. You have no idea, Starflight thought. And it's your fault they found out about us. Oh, sorry, that wasn't her. That was a random dragon. And it's your fault they found out about us, the diamond dragon said. You're the one who brought her here. Even though Deathbringer warned us the dragonets were in the forest, and that we should stay away until they were gone. Deathbringer, Vengeance smirked. Oh yeah, how is your pet, Greatness? I've heard a very interesting story about him. He turned and beckoned with his tail. Starflight recognized the Nightwing assassin who was dragged into the cave by 4 guards. It was starting to get crowded on the ledge by the door. Vengeance seized Deathbringer's ear and virtually threw him onto the stone outcropping with Starflight. They knocked into one another and flung out their wings for balance. Deathbringer wasn't much bigger than Starflight after all. He'd looked larger when he was attacking Queen Blaze and threatening Glory, but here, in the same lava predicament as Starflight, with everyone looking just as displeased with him, he seemed a lot less intimidating. Ah, he said to Starflight in a friendly way. You're here too. His eyes looked as if he wanted to ask something, but didn't dare. This dragon, Vengeance bellowed, pointing at Deathbringer. This pet assassin of Princess Greatness was actually conspiring with the enemy. He is the one who brought the Mudwing here, and he helped them both escape. Princess, Starflight thought. So the Diamond Dragon, Princess, speaks for her mother for some reason. Hang on, Deathbringer said, hopping neatly over Starflight's head so the dragonet was between him and Vengeance. He looked around at the other dragons and spread his wings with an innocent air. Conspiring with the enemy? Oh, sorry, that was... Hang on. Conspiring with the enemy? Do you have any proof? Yeah, I have witnesses, Vengeance hissed. One of the guards she attacked on the way out saw you helping them, and the guard you distracted from the tunnel so the Mudwing could come through. He can all tell us all about that. A terrible silence followed. Starflight wondered whether they were all searching Deathbringer's mind to find out what was true. He kept his own mind carefully blank, just in case. Deathbringer, said Greatness, twisting her diamond necklace in her front claws. That kind of betrayal, the punishment is death. The Nightwing assassin spread his wings and bowed deeply toward the Queen. I swear I have only ever done what I thought would be best for my tribe. Oh yeah? Vengeance coughed wetly. So why are all the dragonets still alive then? Deathbringer glanced under his wing and met Starflight's eyes. There was a question on them, and this time Starflight guessed what it was. Are they still alive? All still alive? Starflight nodded as imperceptibly as he could, and a look of relief flitted across Deathbringer's face. Then it was gone. My mission is not complete, that's true, Deathbringer said. I need to return to the rainforest then, and betray us some more. Vengeance suggested. I bet you do. Starflight noticed Greatness leading toward the screen again, but most of the dragons were staring at Deathbringer and didn't notice this time. I assure you I'm a loyal Nightwing, Deathbringer said, his voice rising. Perhaps I think it's worth discussing whether we really need to kill these dragonets, but... See? Roared Vengeance. He's Vengeance! Vengeance! Greatness shouted, cutting him off. She stood up on her ledge and spread her wings, revealing the silver scales glittering underneath the echoes of her diamonds. She puffed up her chest and contorted her face as if she was trying to appear menacing and regal, but it looked like a performance. Starflight still couldn't see a future queen in her. The queen has spoken. Greatness said into the perilous silence. Vengeance. You endangered the whole tribe. You disobeyed orders. You brought a viper to us disguised as a simple garden snake. Wait! Vengeance cried. What he did was worse. I just grabbed the rainwing, same as always. How could I? She didn't look no different than the others. And in addition, said Greatness, you are irritating the queen. She flicked her tail, just the tiniest movement, at the guards in the doorway. No! Shrieked Vengeance. His wings flapped open, but he barely lifted off when the 4 guards grabbed him. With one swift heave, before Starflight could even have time to blink, they hurled the scarred dragon into the lake of lava. Yeah. And the chapter 2. Oh dear! Well, Nightwings are kind of assholes. Except for, like, 2 of them. Like, Starflight ain't an asshole, obviously. And then there's Deathbringer. He's a good guy after all. Even though he was an assassin sent to kill them. Well, he's a good guy. He turned out to be a good guy. He's in love with Glory. That's why. Remember to hydrate. I barely have any water left. I have 3 chapters left to read. Chapter 3. Deathbringer shot up and out of the way as lava splashed all around them. Starlight didn't move fast enough, and a bright orange droplet splattered on his foot. Burning pain flared through him, and he thought he might faint. Then a shape surged out of the lava. Vengeance, screaming and trying to escape as he was boiled alive. Deathbringer's talons yanked Starlights into the air just in time. Lava sprayed in all directions as the dying dragon flailed his wings. "Don't do this! Save me!" Vengeance howled. The gods stepped forward with expressionless faces. They were wearing a sort of armor, including helmets and thick plates on their over their underbellies, and they were all carrying wicked pronged spears, just like the one Glory had brought back to the rainforest. It was these spears they used to shove Vengeance back under the lava, and to hold him there until the thrashing stopped and the dark shape of the scarred dragon finally sank all the way below the bright gold-red surface and disappeared. After a long moment, Starlight remembered to breathe again. He glanced at Deathbringer, hovering in the air beside him. There was an unusually somber look on the assassin's face, as if he'd just seen a glimpse of his possible future, and not in a magical prophetic vision sort of way. "Thank you, Majesty," Deathbringer said at last, bowing toward the Hidden Queen. "Don't, Deathbringer," Greatness said, her voice cracking. She cleared her throat and looked away. "We're not done with you." She addressed the guards. "Take him to the dungeon. We'll investigate the charges, and then Her Majesty will decide what to do." Deathbringer flew down to the guards and allowed them to push him out the door. Only glancing back once to meet Starlight's eyes with a look Starlight couldn't decide. Maybe he expects me to have mind-reading abilities. Maybe he's trying to send me a message. "I'm so sorry, Deathbringer. You picked the wrong dragon." Greatness rubbed the ridges above her eyes, looking tired. "All right, we need a break. If it's your turn to eat this week, go do that and we'll reconvene tonight." She glanced around the room, leaned toward the screen again, and added, "The Queen says to return at dusk with possible defensive and offensive strategies. Marcia, see if you can claw some information out of this dragonet before then." Marcia dipped his head, flexing her talons. Starlight hoped uneasily that she meant claw in a metaphorical way. The Nightwings began to disperse, most of them through holes in the ceiling. Marcia jerked his head, and Starlight reluctantly followed him back into the tunnels. "So, they don't have a lot of food? Huh. Oh dear. I wonder what's happened to their tribe, like, the land. That's weird." The mention of eating had reminded him of how hungry he was, although he couldn't really worry about food when he wasn't even sure he was a prisoner or a spy or just a failure. And after what had happened to Vengeance, Starlight was pretty nervous about what Nightwings might do with the failure. Marocia's wings billowed like thunderclouds as he stormed ahead of Starlight. Soon Starlight realized that they weren't going back to the dormitory. Marcia had taken a tent somewhere, and now Starlight could see dim grey light overhead. They emerged onto a shelf of rock that jutted from the side of the fortress. Below them was a weird landscape of rocks that looked like giant, lumpy, black-gray dragon scales with a fiery orange glowing underneath, filling in the cracks. A lava field, Starflight thought. He remembered a little about volcanoes from one of the scrolls he'd studied back under the mountain, what felt like a lifetime ago. But there weren't any active volcanoes on the mainland Imperia, so he hadn't memorized it like the other scrolls. It had never occurred to him that the Nightwings, who'd written most of the scrolls, might have first-hand knowledge of volcanoes, might, in fact, be living on one. Starflight couldn't see any caves or a lava river like the one Glory had described, so he guessed they were on the other side of the volcano. But the air was as smoky and grey as she'd said, and as hard to breathe. He still felt that raw scraping feeling all the way down his throat. Far overhead, in the ashy sky, a pair of black dragons wheeled and circled around and around like vultures. Starflight wondered if they could see the mainland from up there. How far was the mainland from the rest of Pyria? Did the Nightwings have a way to get the others? Did the Nightwings have a way to get there other than the secret Animus-made tunnels in the rainforest? So many questions. His whole life, he'd been full of questions about the Nightwings and their secret home, and now perhaps they could all be answered. He took a moment to think. I'm here. This is my home. This is my tribe. This is what I was looking for. But it didn't feel true. This awful place was nothing like the Nightwing utopia he'd always imagined. He pictured a beautiful hidden place full of art and music and dragons who loved to read, with spires reaching to the clouds and waterfalls and sunlight and a library around every corner. Not this. Smoke and stench and hostility and gloomy surroundings. And even a million answers, even all the answers to all the questions he could think of, wouldn't be able to take the place of Sunny and the other dragonettes. Marozia stared across the lava field and inhaled several times, his nostrils flaring and his tongue slithering in and out. He did this for so long that Starflight began to wonder if there was something wrong with his nose. Starflight squeaked at last. Marozia glared at him in the middle of a giant sniff. Just, Starflight said, I just want you to know I don't know anything else. Really. About the Rainwings attacking. Almost immediately, his treacherous brain started clamoring, except that Bellori might be queen by now, and that Rainwings are normally pacifists, and he fixed his eyes on the mountain behind them and tried to think of nothing but lava. Marozia snorted. That doesn't surprise me, he said. You're just about the most useless spy I've ever met. He spread his wings and inhaled once more. Let's go. His tail nearly knocked Starflight off the ledge as he leaped into the sky. Down there? Starflight called, glancing at the molten cracks and the rocks below them. Is it safe? He flapped up to catch up to Marozia. Of course it isn't, Marozia snapped. Several dragons have made the mistake of trying to land down there, only to break the crust and fall through. He nodded at a white shape sticking out of the rocks. Starflight peered at it until he realized what it was, and then he wished he hadn't. His stomach twisted as he spotted a few others. Dragon skulls, the mouth open in an eternal scream. I wouldn't suggest a closer look, Marozia said dryly. We're going over there. He nodded to the far side of the lava rocks, where Starflight now saw a tangle of grey ash-covered trees. So, Starflight cleared his throat. When Greatness said, if it's your turn to eat this week, what did that mean? Marozia hissed. There's a rotating schedule. All Nightwings are allowed to hunt or gather for about 5 days out of every month. Naturally, I am exempt. Naturally? Starflight echoed, although he hadn't meant for it to sound so much like a question. Only 5 days a month? No wonder they're all so thin. They must be running out of food on this island. The older dragon frowned down at him. My role in the tribe's future makes me indispensable. Oh, Starflight said, not daring to ask any more questions. As they got closer to the trees, it turned out to be a bigger forest than Starflight had expected, covering about a quarter of the island, from the edge of the lava to the ocean. I see, he said with a relief. I wondered where you hunted. Surely there wouldn't be much prey on an active volcano. Here, we have to. Here, when we have to, Marozia spat. For instance, when we can't get to the rainforest or the kingdom of sand. His forked black tongue hissed in and out. Oh, that must be another reason they're so angry right now. They've been using a rainforest to find extra prey, he thought. Like that sloth Glory Clay and I found by the river. He had trouble getting the stench of that dying sloth out of his nose. For a moment, Starflight thought the memory of it had brought the smell back, until he realized a similar smell of decay was coming from the forest below him. The whole island was like this when we got here, Marozia said. You mean covered with trees? Starflight asked. What happened? The volcano? Stupid question. Of course it was the volcano. He looked back at the mountain, which must have sent a river of lava this way that covered almost all the trees, turning the island into a mostly barren rockscape. Marozia didn't answer him. They circled overhead once, and Starflight spotted a few other nightwings prowling through the trees. Marozia glowered at them, then flicked his tail at Starflight. Quickly, he snapped, before one of them finds my prey. Your Starflight asked cautiously, but Marozia had already tucked his wings and was arrowing down to a patch of stunted trees not far from the beach. The older dragon landed with a thud that sent grey dust billowing around his talons and immediately dropped his nose to the ground. With a horrible snorting noise, he charged across the clearing, taking deep breaths and flicking his tongue rapidly in and out. Starflight had never seen hunting like this. Dune had taught them what he could in the caves under the mountain, and sometimes it had evolved scent trails. Starflight was always decent at those, but usually it also involved being quiet, waiting to spot your target, and then attacking swiftly, before they even knew you were there. But from the noise Marozia was making, Starflight thought every animal on the island must know he was coming. He followed the larger black dragon, thinking about Dune and his hunting lessons. Their Sandwing Guardian hadn't been particularly kind to the dragonets, although he'd never be as cruel as Prestel. But he'd always noticed how hard Starflight studied, and sometimes he gave him special tutorials and scrolls that Starflight found confusing. Their other guardian, Webs, had often made an effort to bring back more scrolls for Starflight on his trips outside. They'd both been more cautious with him than the other dragonets, perhaps wary that his Nightwing mind reading or prophecy skills might suddenly manifest. Something I'm still waiting for, he thought, hunching his wings. Marozia made a guttural, triumphant noise and swiped a leafless bush out of the way. Underneath was something half dead. More than half dead, Starflight thought. Almost all the way dead. It looked like a pile of grey and white feathers as big as a dragon's head. When the giant Nightwing hooked one claw in it to drag it out, it let out an awful, pathetic squawk. What is it? Starflight asked, trying to remember a bird like this from his scrolls. His curiosity made him forget about being afraid to ask or to talk. It's bigger than any seagull I've seen. A giant albatross, Marozia said, flipping it over. I was sure it would be dead by now. With a shrug, he sliced one claw across the bird's throat. Starflight covered his snout with one of his wings. The toxic smell of the dead bird was almost overwhelming. He wanted to run to the ocean and bury his head in the salt water to make it go away. As Marogisia prodded it a few more times, Starflight spotted a bite on the bird's neck, like the one on the dead sloth in the rainforest. It looked infected and disgusting, crawling with insects. Are you sure that's safe to eat? He asked. I'm the one who killed it, Marozia growled. I'm certainly going to eat it. But won't it make you sick? Marozia gave him a dark look. Nightwings don't get sick. Don't tell me you have a weak stomach in addition to everything else wrong with you. No, I don't think so, Starflight said, hoping he wasn't about to throw up and prove himself wrong. But look, there's probably horrible bacteria all through that wound. Of course there is, Marozia said. How do you think it died? My bite infected it. That's. He paused, frowning at Starflight. Isn't this how you hunt too? Starflight glanced down at the horrible smelling bird. He had a feeling he shouldn't admit that. He shouldn't admit. He had a feeling he shouldn't admit that so far Clay had done most of the hunting since they'd left the mountain. But he also didn't want to admit that he didn't understand this at all. Your brain, he told himself. You can figure this out. You bite your prey, he said slowly, and then you wait for it to die. And then you find it and eat it, once it's already dead and rotting. But it doesn't make you sick. That was not Marozia that said that. That was Starflight. You bite your prey, he said slowly, and then you wait for it to die, and then you find it and eat it once it's already dead and rotting, but it doesn't make you sick. He squinted at Marozia's eyes. There's something in your mouth that kills some, even if the bite itself wasn't fatal. Is it venom? Marozia shook his head. Some Nightwings think so, but none of our scientists have been able to find any have been able to find any when they examine our tribe's corpses. Nor have we had any success replicating rainwing venom shooting. He scowled at the bird and abruptly ripped off one of its wings. You may have this, he said ungenerously tossing it at Starflight. Starflight jumped back to avoid catching it, and the wings splattered to the ground in front of him. Several wriggling things crawled out of it, and he closed his eyes quickly. He said, no thank you. Marozia already had his teeth buried in the underbelly of the albatross. He tore off a mouthful and chewed for a moment, staring narrowly at Starflight. What do you think you're going to eat? He barked. This is a Nightwing way. I'll catch something else, Starflight said. He glanced around. A turtle or a lizard or something. I'm starting to see why you're so useless, Marozia hissed. No one's ever taught you to be a Nightwing. We assumed you'd be born superior like the rest of us, but perhaps you're defective. Well, we don't have time for delicate sensibilities and a lengthy turtle hunt. Eat the wing or starve. Starflight was too intrigued by this strange biological phenomenon to register that he'd just been called defective as well as useless. Listen, it might not make you sick, but I think it would make me sick, Starflight said. He wished he could write all this down. Were there any scrolls about Nightwing fights and what they did to their prey? Maybe he could study the tribe and write the first one. I'm not used to eating infected carrion. Scientifically, I would assume it's something you have to adjust to over time, as your dragonettes will have done, growing up with a diet like this. But I won't have the correct antibodies to keep me safe. It's not worth the risk. The enormous black dragon had paused mid-bite and was staring at Starflight with his mouth open. Well, he said after a long moment, that answers that question. What question? Starflight asked. Marozia picked at his teeth with one claw and lashed his tail. Now I know who your father is. Oh, okay. I mean, the Nightwing Dragonets he met in the beginning did say they had the same mother but different father. So, this is interesting, to say the least. It's much, much different from many of the other tribes we've been to so far. Something obviously happened. Something awful obviously happened. And why haven't they just moved is another question. Chapter 4. The wind of the ocean seized the tree branches and rattled them fiercely. Starflight dug his talons into the ground. It wasn't that he'd forgotten to wonder who his parents were, it was more that he was terrified to hear the answer. A father like Marozia of vengeance, or a mother like greatness of fierce teeth? Perhaps it would be better never to find out, rather than have his dreams meet the inevitable awful reality. But suddenly, the idea that a real dragon somewhere on this island was connected to him and might care about him was almost too much to bear. It's what Sonny and I always talked about, finding our parents. My father, he whispered. Didn't you know who he was before? There were few possibilities, Marozia said grimly. But only one other dragon I know talks like you. He talks like me. Well, it is guaranteed to make him even more insufferable. Marozia muttered, stretching on the other albatross wing and stuffing scraps of meat in his mouth. He's been claiming it was his egg for the last 60 years. Can I meet him? Starflight asked. Oh, there's no getting out of that. Marozia's tail twitched. I'm surprised he didn't drag you down the moment you were dragged in. Must be in the middle of another big experiment. Knows in the scrolls. Probably hasn't even noticed that we're about to go to war. Hold on, they're about to go to war? What? I thought they didn't. I thought they weren't in the war. Like, didn't actually take sides in war. So, what the heck? He wants to meet me. He'll be looking for me. What about my mother? Starflight asked. Could I meet her? No, Marozia said, plucking a feather off his tongue. Dead. Died a few years ago. Oh. Starflight didn't understand the wave of sadness that seemed to punch him in the chest. He hadn't known her. She'd agreed to give up her egg for prophecy, so she couldn't have been very attached to him. She was probably as bad as Coral or Blaze Mother. Still, how did she die? Starflight tried not to look at the mess Marozia was making of the albatross. June and Crystal had always insisted on strict table manners and cleanliness, since they were all trapped under the mountain together, in just a few caves with nowhere to escape to if someone ate their prey in a loud, annoying way. She got herself involved in a battle. Tried to help a sea-wing who'd been attacked by two sky-wings. Marozia grunted. Idiots. So obviously you didn't get that brain from her. He narrowed his eyes at Starflight and waved one of the bird bones for him. At him. Enough. I have questions for you. I really don't know anything, Starflight said in a hurry. How dangerous is a rainwing? Marozia asked, ignoring him. Our studies indicate that most rainwings only care about themselves and prefer everything to be easy. Accurate? Starflight nodded. He looked desperate. He really desperately didn't want to betray Glory in any way, but he couldn't think of a way to avoid Marozia's questions, or lie to him when Marozia was sure to read the truth in his mind. To his surprise, Marozia's shoulders relaxed. That's what I thought. That's what I thought, he said. So perhaps they won't do anything. Perhaps they'll roll over and go back to sleep. Starflight realized that Marozia had misunderstood him. It only meant that laziness was true of most Rainwings, but the Nightwing had heard that it was true of Glory as well. But the Nightwing had heard that it was true of Glory as well. Maybe, he said non-committally. He tried not to think about how Glory would never let go of this. How she would fight tooth and claw to rescue the Rainwing prisoners. It had been strange seeing her like that, as if she'd borrowed Tsunami's ferocity for a day. For years, Glory had acted as though she didn't care about anything. But apparently, imprisoning and torturing members of her tribe was one way to get her attention. He remembered what the council had said. What plan was the council talking about? He asked. What is it we don't know the Rainwings to know? We don't want the Rainwings to know. He stumbled over the words, trying to say we as if he could be part of this tribe, but he wanted Marozia to feel as if Starflight was on their side, that he could be trusted. It was a trick he'd seen Sunny use a few times when Glory and Tsunami were fighting. Why are we mad at Tsunami today? Now, what has Glory done to us? And it often worked. Not this time, though. The less you know, the better, Marozia snapped. You'll get in less trouble that way. That wasn't generally Starflight's philosophy. He'd say knowing more was always better than knowing less. Marozia ripped the last chunk of flesh off the bird and spat out several more feathers. If you're determined to starve, he muttered, and devoured the wing he'd thrown to Starflight in a few bites. Very well, he grumbled. Let's go see Mastermind. He flung the remains of the birds into the bushes and jumped into the sky. Then I'll take you to the alternates, he said over his shoulder. The what? Starflight asked, but Marozia was winging away quickly and didn't look back. Starflight followed him, still thinking about the way Nightwings hunted. It explained a few things, including the bad breath on all the dragonets and in the dormitory. Oddly, Deathbringer didn't seem to have the same smell. Starflight wondered if the assassins spent more time on the continent than other Nightwings, and had learned to prefer live prey over carrion, like most dragons. Ahead of them, the Nightwing fortress loomed, black against the grey sky. It was massive, built in layers that wrapped halfway around the mountain, but it also looked somehow precarious, as if one rock shelf could shift underneath it and the whole thing might suddenly slide all the way into the ocean. In fact, Starflight squinted. It was hard to see at first, black on black and the dark smoky air, but as they got closer, he was sure. Part of the fortress had been swallowed by lava, clearly some time ago. The whole corridor of the building, at least as big as Queen Scarlet's gladiator arena, was covered by a hardened mass of black rock bubbles. It looked like a giant dragon had reached out of the mountain and slapped its talons down over the walls. Starflight glanced up uneasily at the plume of steam rising from the top of the volcano. Orange gold fire glowed from inside, and he knew that streams of molten lava ran down at least one face of the mountain toward the caves where the Rainwings were trapped. If Glory's description was right, surely another eruption could come any time, endangering the rest of the fortress. That thought made him even more nervous about following Marozia back inside, but he didn't have much choice. The large Nightwing ducked into a mouth-like opening on the highest level of the fortress. The tunnels here were lit with hanging chandeliers of torches as well as a niche of poles Starflight had seen before. The stone under his talons felt smoother and more polished, as if it was frequently swept or mopped, unlike the lower tunnels. Starlight thought of the gold dragon prince in the Sky Palace, the emerald-studded throne in the Kingdom of the Sea, and the colorful flowers that wound all around the Rainwing village. There was nothing like that here. Nothing to break up the monotony. I have no idea how to say that word. I'm Danish. Of the stone wall. Nothing to showcase the wealth and power of the Nightwings. Then again, I guess no one ever comes here, he thought. Instead of trying to impress other dragons with opulence, they do it with mystery. He could see how that would make sense, but it would have been nice to see something besides fire and rock in all directions. As they turned a corner, Starlight paused and looked back. He thought he'd heard, but maybe he was imagining things. But it had sounded like claws tip-tapping on the stone behind him. He stared along the dark tunnel and suddenly had a shivering feeling of hope. Maybe it's Glory, he thought. Maybe she's here in camouflage. Maybe she's come to rescue me. He couldn't imagine how she would have gone past the Nightwing guards who must be posted around the tunnel. In fact, if he were in charge, he'd have stuck a Nightwing in the tunnel at all times, just to be sure no one could invisibly squeeze by. But maybe the Nightwings weren't that smart. There was again. Tap, tap, tap. Definitely Talons, although whoever it wasn't doing a terrific job at being stealthy. Glory is so much better at sneaking than that. Maybe it's Clay. It was hopeful. It was awful how much his chest hurt with hope. If only it were Clay. Only that big brown head would poke around the bend, see him, and grin. Starlight promised the universe that he would never, ever make fun of Clay again. If only the Mudwing would suddenly be here rescuing him. Keep up, Marozia growled from up ahead. Starlight realized that he was really being an idiot. If someone were trying to sneak up behind them to rescue him, it wouldn't much help if Starlight stood there staring at them. He started to turn to follow Marozia just as he did, but just then, a head did poke around the last corner. It wasn't Clay, or Glory or Tsunami, or Sunny. It was just a Nightwing Dragonette. She stared right at him for a startled moment, and then she shrugged and turned away. But at the same time, she yelped. "Oh my gosh, it's you!" and bolted up at him, grabbing his front talons. "I had a vision about you," she declared grandly. He froze in the act of trying to pull his talons away. Have you had any visions about me?" "You did?" Starlight said, blinking. She appeared to be his own age, so if she was having visions, the men dragonettes did develop their powers before they were full grown, which meant Starlight should have something by now. But he didn't. Whenever he tried to read minds or see the future, it was like staring into the night sky, empty and cold and meaningless. He hadn't admitted that to Marozia yet. Speaking of whom, the floor now trembled ominously as the older Nightwing came thundering back along the tunnel to them. His eyes nearly popped out of his skull when he saw the new Dragonette. "Fate Speaker!" he roared so loud that Starlight thought the volcano might erupt right then. "I told you to stay in your cave with the others." "I know, I heard you," she said tearfully. "But I got bored, and I wanted to explore, and I saw you flying by, so I thought I'd come too. Can't believe I'm in the Nightwing Fortress. I can't believe I'm in the Nightwing Fortress at last. I've had lots of prophetic dreams about it, you know," she said conspiratorially to Starlight. She still had his front talons pressed between hers, although in those it was actually bigger and lighter and smelled way less terrible. Plus, it had a lot more treasure and seriously less grouchy dragons. She thought for a moment, maybe they were just regular dreams. "Fate Speaker," Marozia hissed. "What did I say about keeping your visions to yourself?" "You said shut up about You said, shut up about. Why can't I say that? Shut up about your visions. I'm not remotely interested. Face Speaker answered, but that doesn't mean this dragon isn't interested. Aren't you interested? She said to Starflight. He was, but he did not think it would be wise to admit that in front of Morosia, who had smoke rising from his nostrils. Starflight tried to study the dragonet without obviously staring. Fate Speaker's black scales shimmered with underscales of deep blue and purple. Like Starflight's wings, hers was scattered with silver scales on the underside, so they looked like part of the night sky. But unlike his, Fate Speaker had several extra silver scales, one on the outside corner of each eye, a band, a band circling one ankle, and a few lone ones sparkling along her tail like starry freckles. Anyway, I just know you're terribly important, she said to him, releasing his talons, and that we have a great destiny together. We do? He thought hopefully. Perhaps he was going to survive this Nightwing fortress after all. Am I actually useful in this great destiny? Are my friends here? Am I with Sun? Are my friends there? Am I with Sunny? He wished he could ask her questions without Morosia breathing furiously over their heads. Go back to the others, Morosia ordered. Oh, can I come with you? Fate Speaker asked. She gave Morosia a pleading look. I foresee that I'll be really helpful with whatever you're about to do. Also, I'll find it totally interesting. I don't think that counts as foreseeing, Starflight said. It sounds like more like guessing. Morosia growled deep in his throat. Very well. Keep your mouth shut and don't get in the way. As if I would, Fate Speaker said happily, immediately tripping Starflight with her tail. Morosia stomped away, muttering. Fate Speaker gave Starflight an enormous smile that reminded him of Sunny. He wondered if Sunny missed him, and whether she felt anything like that, the ache that filled his chest whenever he thought of her. Oh my! Sad face, Fate Speaker said, nudging Starflight's wing as they walked. Cheer up! What's your name? That wasn't in your vision? Starflight tilted his head curiously. He'd always wondered how much detail the visions had. The prophecy Morosia had delivered years ago was remarkably cryptic, but perhaps there was more information in the seer's head that he hadn't shared. Fate Speaker wobbled her head back and forth, squinting thoughtfully at him. Oh, of course! Toes! What? Starflight glanced down at his talons, a little offended. No, it's Starflight. Oh, she said. Are you sure? Quite sure. She shrugged. Well, it was close. Hi, Starflight. I'm Fate Speaker. You're probably wondering why you've never seen me before. Starflight paused mid-step and frowned at her. Am I? It's because I didn't grow up here. She carried on blithely without noticing his reaction. Morosia's growl echoed down the corridor, and they both started walking faster. Only got to the island yesterday. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I was raised by the talents of peace. Starflight walked straight into a chandelier. He staggered back and hit his head spinning. Oh, ouch, Fate Speaker said. She patted his shoulder gingerly. That looked painful. Anyway, so it turns out I'm part of that big dragonet prophecy everyone is so excited about. Can you believe it? No, Starflight thought. I'm the wings of night, she said proudly. Morosia said it's up to me to stop the war. For some reason, he seems kind of grumpy about that. Starflight felt all his hope flicker and go out. He'd been praying quietly that maybe there was another Nightwing intervention to point him in the right direction. He'd hoped perhaps he'd been given another lecture. He'd be given another lecture and then sent back to his friends. But apparently, Fierce Teeth was right. He was here because he failed. And Fate Speaker was his replacement. End of chapter 4. I barely have any water left and my throat is so dry. That was the last of my water. Ugh, 2 hours. Well, chapter 5. This is the last chapter of the day. I always take 5 chapters each stream. There we go. Chapter 5. It made sense. Fate Speaker had powers and Starflight did not. He'd failed to follow Marcia's orders more than once. He was a useless Nightwing and a useless Dragonet of Destiny. Wow, Fate Speaker said, finally noticing his expression. You look like someone just ate your only walrus. Are you alright? Starflight began. I just thought. They came around a bend in the tunnel and nearly stepped on Marocia's tail. He gave them a glare that shut Starflight up in a hurry. Fate Speaker, however, was undaunted. Maps, she read off the door in front of them. Ooh, what does that mean? It means don't touch anything, Maroccia said grimly. We are here so Starflight can meet his father. If we're very unlucky, he'll have time to give us a tour of all the experiments he's working on. He hissed, let's get this over with. The door swung open to reveal a huge room, more brightly lit and cleanly kept than any other part of the fortress that Starflight had seen. They were standing on a balcony. There was a level above them and a level below them, and a crisscrossing network of strange pipes stretching across the space in front of them. No, no! Cried a voice. A whip-thin black dragon shot down from the top level and hovered in front of them. He wore an odd helmet over his head, with only a few small holes poked in it for him to see out. Rather like the Queen's Council screen, Starflight thought. I must not be interrupted. This experiment is at a critical juncture, and greatness says I might be shut down at any moment. Everyone please leave. He flapped his wings and front talons at them. Mastermind, Maroccia said coolly. Seems you were right all along. The Dragonet from Farsight's egg is apparently your son, and he is here now, so I've brought him to meet you. Starflight tensed, expecting the other dragon to shrug and shoo them away. But instead, Mastermind reached up and removed his helmet, revealing a snout pockmarked with little scars and curious bloodshot eyes. My son? He said, and Starflight felt a happy shiver at the tone of wonder in his voice. Mastermind landed on the balcony beside them, set his helmet on the floor, and took Starflight's shoulders in his talons. 3 moons, he said. What a handsome dragonet. He does look like me. I knew he would. As I suspected, the jawline is genetically dominant. He gestured at the same spot on himself and on Starflight. Ah, and yes, see this way the star scales on our wings spray outward like a splash of water, whereas Marocia's, for instance, curl inward more like a snail's shell. He flared one of his wings and then reached for Marocia's, but the larger Nightwing batted him away with a snarl. All theories at this point, of course. Mastermind said, and Starflight found himself smiling back at his father's toothy grin. A large dataset would naturally be essential for proving anything, but one is much better than none. Entirely wonderful, in fact, especially compared to most of the rest of the tribe, including yourself, right, Marcia? No Dragonet suggests? Marcia's face indicated that he did not intend to dignify that with a response. But I have a son, Mastermind said proudly. I of all dragons. Let's see strong winds laugh now. Just wait until everyone sees my handsome offspring. He clapped Starflight's shoulder again. So strong and healthy. You can be the assistant I've been looking for. What are you interested in, son? Son. Starflight's knees felt as if they might not hold him up very well for much longer. Everything, he stammered. Scrolls. I like scrolls. Fantastic, Mastermind said. I have lots of scrolls. How about desalination? What the fuck? I'm sorry? Desalinization? Desalinization? Know anything about it? Starflight perked up a little, taking the salt out of seawater to make it potable, right? Potable? Potable? Fate's Beaker interjected. She was watching them with wide, startled eyes, and Starflight remembered that she didn't know yet that he'd been raised away from the island too. Drinkable, Starflight explained. It's what the loose pipe. Is that what those loose pipes are for? Very good, said Mastermind, waving his talons excitedly. We have only one freshwater source on the island, and it's become rather contaminated with ash over the last few years. So I invented this magnificent contraption to provide safe water for the entire tribe. He talked on and on, pointing to various pipes and explaining the science behind the process. Starflight listened with fascination. He'd never met a dragon who seemed so full of information, like a walking library of scrolls. Come, come, Mastermind said eagerly, gathering his helmet and leaping off the balcony. I'll show you what else I'm working on. Starflight glanced at Morosia for permission, and the large Nightwing rolled his eyes and sat down with a yawn. Fate Speaker didn't wait to be invited. She flew beside them as Mastermind led the way down to the bottom level. Here is where I do all my volcanology. That's a weird word. He said, striding between the tables laden with cauldrons of lava and steaming holes dug right into the ground. I'm testing for materials that can withstand eruptions and working on scale models of barriers and outlining possible implementation systems. No wonder I need an assistant, right? This place is pretty cool. This place is pretty cool, Fate Speaker said, glancing around the volcano experiments. Let's see what you said. Yeah. Hi. You're a troll. Please don't. I'm a big fan watching your content since I was 5. Really like all the hard work you do. I really support the grind. Well, considering I've well, you'd be 5 right now. You'd have to be 5 right now. I started like a few months ago. So, unless you're actually 5, what you said was just a falsehood, and yeah, you don't really care. Pretty sure you don't really care. Right. Right. I don't believe you. Sorry. Unless your parents are extremely stupid. And what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah. No wonder they raised a troll, so. I'm just gonna continue reading. And I don't care if you don't mind. This is my stream. If you don't plan on being nice and behaving and being kind, I'm just gonna. Yeah. It's amazing, Starflight said. He peered down at the smoke issuing from the peephole. He wanted to study each section of the lab in careful detail. There was a strange contraption in the corner that looked like as if it was designed to fit entirely around a dragon and then be filled with something. Water, maybe? He couldn't even imagine. He already had a million questions and a couple of ideas about lava that might be worth testing, if his dad didn't mind some suggestions. Mastermind flicked his tail at a corner of the lab, where tiny versions of the mountain had been constructed with little fortresses dug on the side. Several of them were already smoldering ruins. Not going well, as you see. He laughed a little, almost nervously. Queen Battlewinner isn't pleased about that. Of course, she has her own ideas about where I should be focusing my attention. Come, come! He lifted off toward the top level. Starlight took one more look around, wondering what could be more interesting or important than protecting the tribe from the volcano. I wonder if he's done any research on nightwings infecting the prey they bite. Maybe I can help him study that. He shook himself, blinking. Sounds like I'm planning to stay. He glanced at Fate Speaker, then quickly away at one of the smoking jars of lava. Might not have any choice about that, but they have to let me see Sunny again. If I'm trapped here forever without her, without even a chance to say goodbye. Come on! Fate Speaker interrupted his thoughts, tugging him into the air. They hurried after Mastermind and discovered that the third level was another balcony with several doors ranged around it, each one marked with 3 or 4 different symbols. Starflight's father stopped in front of one door and rubbed his front talons together. About a year ago, we discovered a truly astonishing natural phenomenon. You won't know about this. The Talons of Peace have no idea. None of the other tribes do. Our understanding of this biological anomaly as is as yet so new and incomplete that we haven't even put it in any scrolls. Certainly not the ones we distribute to the mainland, but also not even the ones that are from Nightwing Eyes only. I'm preparing a treatise on the subject, but there's still so much to learn that I have no idea when I think it'll be ready for publication. I honestly don't know what to think about you anymore. Yeet. There, yeet. I mean, I don't have a problem with saying yeet. But please don't be joking about that, actually. Bye. Great to not have you in my chat any longer. Or my stream. Joking about that makes you a horrible person, just saying. I will donate to help fix your damage caused by rats if you say yeet. Bye, yeet. Like, fuck you, honestly. This is serious. There's a reason I have this donation goal. Just saying. Not something to joke about because we literally have no money. It's difficult for us right now. We only have one source of income for 7 people, and there's just a lot that we need money for that we don't have the money for. So this is not. No. Uno reverse. Prove that you have a YouTube account with 2.5 million subs. Also, that is only like a fourth of what my mom said we might have to pay. So you are so right. You're trying to get banned, aren't you? I have no problem with getting you banned, with banning you. Do you want to get banned? Or like, I literally have no idea why a lot of people are like that. Why people think that's funny. It's not. You see, he said, leaning toward them. It turns out one tribe of dragons have evolved an unusual defense mechanism. They can shoot venom from their fangs, deadly toxic venom that essentially melts any animal or plant matter it comes in contact with. And you'll never believe which tribe. He didn't wait for them to guess. Rainwings! Rainwings! Fate Speaker echoed in a surprised voice. Starlight's heart was sinking. He suddenly had a feeling he really did not want to see what was behind these doors. Let's see, we'll start here, Mastermind said. He opened one of the doors to reveal a long, narrow stone room. He said a silver shackle with very short chains. A set of silver shackles with very short chains was bolted to a floor near the entrance. And all along the length of the room, black marks scarred the floor and walls with indecipherable notes scribbled beside each one in chalk. Starlight stared at the shackles, feeling ill. Mastermind hopped down the room, avoiding the black patches, although they all seemed to be hardened and harmless, like old lava. This was one of our first questions, naturally. When we first learned that rainwings could shoot venom, how far? Was it short range weapon? Was it a short range weapon or a long range weapon? Would we be able to approach and incapacitate them if we developed projectiles that could be fired from a safe distance? He stopped at the far end of the room and indicated a mark on the roof on the floor. This is as far as I've seen any one dragon shoot. An older male rainwing. So my hypothesis is that it's a skill that gets stronger as they age. He rubbed the horns. He rubbed the horns on his head, frowning in thought. I wonder if they have any elderly dragons we could bring over and test. Bring over, Starflight thought bitterly, as if they're invited guests instead of abducted prisoners. Fate Speaker was eyeing the shackles nervously too. She looked as if she didn't know quite how to ask about them. The next obvious question is what materials aren't affected by the venom? Anything we could use as armor or shield? Mastermind went on, hopping back up the room toward them. Tack. Tack. Tack, tack.
Hvor længe bliver du ved? Hvad er det? 2 timer?
Ja, jeg skal bare lige have afsluttet det her kapitel. Right, of course, it was your little brother. Come, come! He ushered them out and over to the next door. We had to devise ways to study these dragons without placing ourselves in danger naturally. Very few rainwings have ever deliberately tried to shoot their venom at us, but it goes very badly when they do. It's quite horrifying, actually. He opened the door and swept his talon toward the tables inside. Items of different shapes, sizes, and materials were arranged in related groups. You mean artist? I mean, a mediocre at best, I'd say. Mm. He opened the door and swept his talon toward the tables inside. Items of different shapes, sizes, and materials were arranged in related groups. One table contained a gathering of sad little plants in pots, drooping yellow flowers dripping with black. Another was all rocks, and a third, Starflight looked quickly away when he realized that the trays of contained remains when he realized that the trays all contained remains of living things, sloths, lizards, fish that hadn't survived the experimental process. Ew! Fatespeaker cried. We've tested it on everything, Mastermind said proudly. Turns out it doesn't affect metal, though. He banged on his helmet, which gave off a muffled clang in response. But everything alive, plant or animal, it just destroys. If it gets in your eye or your bloodstream, you're dead within minutes. If it only hits your scales, you'll wish you were. We have a couple of recent victims I'll be getting to study as soon as they're released from the healers. He rubbed his talons together. If you're lucky, I'll let you take a peek, he said to Starflight, a once in a lifetime opportunity to see what rainwing venom can do. I know what it can do, Starflight choked out. I've seen it kill 2 dragons. Possibly 3 if Queen Scarlet is dead. He thought of Fjord, the first dragon Glorious Venom had killed, the Icewing who had been about to kill Clay in the arena. Some of the poison had landed on the open wounds on Fjord's neck. That must have been why it killed him so quickly. And Crocodile, the Mudwing who had betrayed the talons of peace and led the enemy right to the Summer Palace. When Glory killed her so they could escape, her venom had gone right into the dragon's eyes. But Queen Scarlet... He shifted uneasily. If you remembered right, Glory's spray of venom had landed on the side of the Queen's face. So she really might still be alive. Alive and looking for like vengeance. Alive and looking like vengeance. Which didn't bode well for the dragonettes. Mastermind stared at him avidly. 2 dragons? Killed them? Are you sure? How incredibly careless. We haven't picked up any rainwings with that little control. It wasn't careless, it was on purpose, Starflight said, annoyed on Glory's behalf. Fatespeaker sucked in an astonished breath. Well, I never. Are you sure? His father's wings flared. He looked equal parts alarmed and enthralled. That changes things entirely. A variable I hadn't considered. You'll have to tell me all about it. What prompted the attack? What it looked like? How long it took the victims to die? Whether there was any time to fight back? Starflight realized too late that he shouldn't have said anything. If this information got back to the council, they'd know how dangerous Glory was. He had to hope that Mastermind was too wrapped up in his experiments to tell anyone. My! Mastermind headed toward the next door. Well, knowing the venom only worked on certain substances led us to the next project, constructing armor that could withstand a rainwing attack if necessary. But But it isn't necessary, Fate Speaker chimed in. Rainwings don't attack other dragons. Everyone knows that. She looked at Starflight. Well, they're not supposed to. Even a Rainwing will defend herself sometimes. Not often, not in my experimentation, said Mastermind, but why don't you stand back just in case? He waved them a few steps away, settled his helmet over his head, and flung open the door. Inside, a dragon was pinned to the wall. End of chapter 6. The last of the day. It is book 4 in the series Wings of Fire. This one is called The Dark Secret. There are 15 books in total. Well, the 15th book is still being written. The 14th came out this December. And there are 2 Legends books that happen 2,000 years before the series. And then there are like 4 small books called Winglets. They're like separate from the series, but also contain spoilers for book 5, so I haven't read those yet. But yeah, I've been going for 2.5 hours. Damn, I've been going for 2.5 hours. That was longer than I expected. But we got through the first 5 chapters of the book. And yeah, I'll be streaming more regularly. Both reading and playing Undertale. And that's it, really. And hoping someone comes along and would be able to donate. But yeah. Yes. But it is, oh dear lord, it is 11:30 p.m. for me, so peace.